Gartner IT Symposium 2023, the opening keynote was entitled The Next Era We Shape AI, AI Shapes Us. Gartner Distinguished VP Analyst Don Scheibenreif declared that AI has reached the peak of the Gartner hype cycle and that AI is everywhere, and that we are in an era where AI will infuse everything that we do. Or the CIO, the challenge becomes one of identifying and facilitating this human to machine relationship. Gartner says where people are missing the boat is in the recognition that AI is not a technology, but a business trend. Recently, I spoke to Colin Tan, General Manager and Technology Leader at IBM Singapore, to get his perspective on how AI is impacting organizations in Singapore and around the region. From a business perspective, what do we mean by foundational AI, and how does foundational AI relate to the more popular term we hear these days, generative AI?
Okay, maybe I'll start off to look at the AI adoption today, right? I think, in fact, AI adoption has been accelerating for the last decade, right, reaping benefits for the business and so on. However, the AI perspective, that still poses two challenges, right? One is actually on the operationalizing of the AI, and secondly is to apply AI at scale, right? And in fact, if you look at some of the surveys that's been done and so on, right, I think 35% of the companies actually embrace AI for business, right? I think 40 over percent is actually exploring the use of the technology. And in fact, maybe perhaps 54%, half of it actually started from moving from pilot to production, right? I think the challenge is that as you actually scale AI for any of the new cases and new scenarios that you have, typically you need a large data sets to train, right? And while you move from one to another, there's actually a lot of effort to actually build that, right? And the difference between a foundational model is very much, a foundational model is actually trained on a large amount of data, or I would say unlabeled data. And whatever that we train will actually allows you to accelerate in terms of bringing new cases and new scenarios to X scale, I would say. And however, the difference is that for foundation model, typically you actually need a huge amount of probably more investment and effort upfront. And while this effort and investment will actually amortize over time, when you actually roll out with different data requirements to cater for new scenarios and test cases over time, I would say, right? And actually, in fact, with this approach, actually, in fact, increases the return investment and actually reduces the time to market, I would say.
So, how does it relate to generative AI?
Okay, generative AI, in simplicity, I would say that generative AI simply describe the algorithm that actually able to provide new contents, right? And the new contents could be in the form of codes, it could be in the form of videos, text, simulation, and so on and so forth, right? And typically for generative AI, it can be used in cases where it actually augments the human intelligence, right? And it doesn't actually replaces the human decision-making process, I would say. And in the real business world, I would say that, give you an example, right? In areas like code generation, right? It's capable of issuing just a natural language and probably creates a code, or it can even create a codes from one languages to another. Let's say, for example, I have a SAS code that's written on operational risks, and I could easily leverage on generative AI or leverage on my foundation model to actually change or migrate it, convert that into a Python code that can run on any Sparks engine and so on and so forth, right? And I use cases like in the context of, let's say, HR, employees and so on. I could actually easily issue a natural language and say that, oh, I'd like to apply leave, right? Maybe I want to create a job requisition, right? So that's the benefit of leveraging on the generative AI, and at the same time to actually build on the foundation that you have and to accelerate your time to value.
Could you share some examples of how software products based on foundational AI models can unlock new levels of productivity, performance, and speed?
Okay, I would say that from I mentioned about the foundation model, right? And very much we focus on multi-domain foundational model that look at different aspects of the business data, right? And the data itself could be structured data, unstructured data, geospatial, the maybe mixed modality data that actually combines text with images and so on and so forth, right? And I think the important is that with the foundation model that we actually built, like Watson X and so on, right? The foundation is already there, and whatever new cases that you want to look at, whether it's in the form of looking at cybersecurity, looking at certain different use cases and so on, you could actually build data sets that is actually on top of the foundation model, and that actually accelerates the time to value and so on. And in fact, if you look at some of the research that we've done, I would say probably a third of the organization will probably be leveraging on foundation model to actually accelerate the AI adoption at scale within the enterprise. And with some of the early adopters and so on, we are actually seeing probably a 70% improvement in terms of the time to value, right? Leveraging on the foundation model and so on, right? I think in pertaining to the question on how it helps on the IT automation and so on, I think in the modern IT landscape today, in the organization, right, I would say that most organization has a proliferation of different tool sets, right? And I think the challenges has been having a single view of the entire estates that they have, and having a visibility of the incidents, right? And even looking into what's the resource utilization and so on and so forth, right? And in fact, AI solution like AI Ops could really help in terms of addressing some of these areas, right? And being able to accelerate and provide the visibility in terms of what is the tickets that's been logged, what are the predictive areas that you look at from a IT system and monitoring standpoint, and in fact be able to provide a view of how is your resource utilization across the whole estates of the infrastructure that you have and so on. And that will actually in fact help to optimize and actually reduce the cost in terms of managing those assets and so on.
Why is information architecture essential for businesses that want to adapt AI to scale?
I think information architecture to me is really very core, right? I think if you look at AI itself, AI actually requires machine learning, right? Machine learning in turn actually requires analytics. And analytics actually requires a robust and resilient data information architecture, right? I think end of the day is that the AI model they built is actually as good as the underlying data that fuels it, right? And actually really critical that you actually look at the right data set to actually begin with. And as we all understand that, if you are looking at the data quality issue and so on, and that will potentially impact in terms of the outcome that you're looking at, right? And the outcome is not something that you actually wanted to, and so on, right? So I think some of the challenges that we've seen in terms of the AI adoption, I think we've been hearing is one is the having challenges in terms of the complexity of the data, right? The different kind of data and so on. And secondly, of course, in terms of integrating the data and so on, right? So I think in fact, that's the reason why you should really look at a data fabric where you're actually able to augment and pull together the various data that you have, and having the right governance in place for any of the AI solution that you build, I would say, right? And talking about that, I think if you look at the data accessibility layer and so on, data could be everywhere, right? It can be sitting on-prem, on your mainframe, on your distributed systems, private cloud, and so on and so forth.
Even all the way to your phone, right?
Exactly, right? And it can be on cloud. It could be on various hyperscalers and so on and so forth, right? I think the important thing is to have the flexibility and capabilities to be able to access this information, right? Readily for you to build your AI models and so on. right?
So just as a point of clarity for
Yeah.
our viewers on this, before you can even start thinking about artificial intelligence, you actually have to go down to the very basics, the data itself. You need to clean it, structure it,
Yes.
have governance in place before you
Yes.
can start talking about, oh, let's play around with
Yes.
generative AI
Yep.
and see what it can do for us.
Yeah, I would say that is very crucial, right? Because at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to build the trust and transparency. And that's why I think the governance aspect of cell from the start of the project is very key. And this is not something that's going to be an afterthought after the project and so on, I would say.
Okay. What is Watson's X data and what is the role it plays in this journey, especially in addressing the issue of data silos?
So Watson X data offers the following 4 use cases, I would say. I think one will be looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning, X scale, right? Efficiently building of the models, training of the models, refining of the models, as well as deployment of the models and so on, right? And of course, the important thing is with governance that provides lineage as well as full traceability to the models and so on, right? Second is real-time analytics and business intelligence, right? Combining data across diverse sources, be it on-premise or on cloud and so on. And in some cases, you don't have to actually physically move the data, right? That simplifies the complexity and the cost of duplicating data across the different environments and so on, right? Third, we are talking about streamlining data engineering in terms of simplifying the data pipeline for AI, including transformation, and being able to use multiple query languages like SQL, Pythons, and AI infused interfaces and so on to actually access the data seamlessly and so on, right? And of course, the fourth thing will be the responsible data sharing. I think end of the day, what's important is to be able to enable self-service of the broad spectrum of the data that you have with security as well with compliance in mind.
How does IBM ensure its AI products are ethical and trustworthy, especially when it comes to businesses' data? Is there a risk of data memorization, for example, given that foundational models use large amounts of data?
I think the fundamental is that AI must be built on the foundation of trust and transparency, right? I think the main thing is that taking ethical shortcuts is going to be on the AI is going to lead you to profit on the short term, but that's going to have an effect and lead them with risks that the organization will need to actually manage and so on, right? I think very much we actually focus on 5 fundamental properties of trustworthy AI, very much explainability, fairness, robustness, transparency, as well as privacy, I would say. Right, and in some cases, you've heard of this term called model hallucination, right? I think the important thing is that your model is able to incorporate the user training as well on top of some of these properties that I actually mentioned. So I say that IBM actually adheres to 3 fundamental principles, right? I think one is the purpose of AI is very much to augment human intelligence, right? It's not replacing human decision making, right? It basically drive automation as well as the productivity. Okay. Secondly is that data and insight belong to the creator, right? I think end of the day is that the client's data is their data and the whatever insights is actually their insights as well, right? And I think the important thing will be in terms of the government policy, we should make sure that it's actually fair and equitable, right? I would say the third thing will be in terms of technology must be transparent and explainable, right? I think the important thing is to be able to look at who creates the model, who trains the model, what kind of data is being used, and has full governance and traceability back to the source.
Now we're coming into the end of 2023 and moving into 2024. What would be your advice for organizations looking to tap into the opportunities of artificial intelligence today and perhaps into the new year?
I would say that you always lead with use cases as well as the outcome, right? And I think AI adoption is actually a journey, right? I think it's important to look at the end vision and end goal that you want to achieve and take a piecemeal adoption and to drive success along the way, right? I think that's very important. And it's not just the technology that we're talking about. I think beyond technology, we always talk about the people as well as the process, right? I think there needs to be proper change management in place to embrace changes in terms of the roles and responsibility, and how that augments the human interaction and so on, as well as implication or impacts in terms of the business process and so on and so forth, right? So I think the last thing that I think is really important is governance cannot be afterthought, right? I think governance will always need to be the core and the forefront of AI adoption.